Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Now let's start with the story. Betrayal never comes the way you expect. Sometimes, it walks right through your front door dressed up like love. If you had told me years ago that the people I trusted most would be the ones to destroy me, I wouldn't have believed you. But that's exactly what happened. My name is Vincent Phillips, and I thought I was doing everything right. Working hard, loving my family, trying to build a better life. I wasn't perfect, but I damn sure tried to be a good man. I was raised in the church, brought up to believe that if you do right, right will follow you. But nobody tells you what to do when the very hands meant to lift you up are the ones dragging you under. It's funny. The day I was arrested, the cuffs cold around my wrists, I turned to look across the courtroom, and there they were. Two women I had trusted, one I loved, the other I thought had my back. And they were pointing fingers at me like I was the villain in a story they wrote. But karma don't play favorites. It always circles back. Let me take you to the beginning. I grew up on the east side of Detroit, in a small house with chipped paint and a crooked fence, but it was home. We had a tiny patch of grass out front and a porch just big enough for a couple of chairs and my mama's flower pots. Elena Phillips, my mama, was the strongest woman I've ever known. She was the backbone of True Faith Baptist Church. You'd find her up at dawn every Sunday, pressing her choir robe and humming "His Eye is on the Sparrow" under her breath. "Vincent, baby, grab that songbook for me, would you?" she'd say, her voice sweet but firm as she tied her church hat on in front of the mirror. I'd be sitting on the edge of the couch, pulling on my two small dress shoes. "Yes, ma'am," I'd mumble half awake. She made sure I was in the front pew every single Sunday, no matter what. "You sit still and you listen," she'd whisper as we filed into the sanctuary. "Pastor William got a word from God today, and you need to hear it." And I always did. I might not have understood all of it back then, but I knew better than to disrespect the house of the Lord, or my mama. She believed in faith, in community, in doing right even when life gets hard. And me? I believed in her. I believed in the things she taught me sitting on that porch while she sang hymns and watched over the neighborhood like a quiet guardian. But the world outside that porch? It had other plans for me. The devil tempts idle hands, baby. That's what my mama used to tell me every time I tried to sneak in an afternoon doing nothing. She'd nudge me toward my books or hand me a broom and say, "Stay busy with the Lord's work, and evil can't find its way in." Mama wasn't just talking to hear herself speak. She meant every word. She raised me on her own after my father walked out when I was just 3. I don't remember the man, just the shape of his absence. But Mama? She was always there. Morning, noon, and night. She cleaned houses during the day, scrubbed office floors after dark, and somehow still had the strength to sit in the front pew every Sunday with a smile on her face and a Bible in her lap. Wednesday nights, too. Rain, snow, didn't matter, we were at Bible study. "You coming straight from school?" she'd ask me over the phone while wiping down countertops somewhere in Grosse Pointe. "Yes, ma'am. And not walking past them corner boys, right?" "I ain't, Mama. I swear." She'd sigh, half in relief, half in that tired way of hers. "Good. You don't need what they got. They smile at you now, but the devil smiles too." Mama never let me forget right from wrong. Not for a second. "Shortcuts come with strings, Vincent," she'd say every time I complained about how hard she worked. I remember one night in particular, her sitting on the couch, feet swollen like soft potatoes, rubbing them slow while the fan blew weak air across the room. "Nothing worth having comes easy," she told me, not even looking up. Remember that. The easy path leads to hard times. I carried her words with me into adulthood like scripture of my own. By the time I hit 35, I had checked all the boxes, at least on paper. Steady job at the warehouse, loading and unloading trucks. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. My back ached most nights, but I told myself that's what being a man meant. Pain meant progress. I had a wife, too. Mariana. Met her at church. Pretty smile, soft voice, and eyes that made you want to do right just so you wouldn't disappoint her. We got married 2 years after meeting, and not long after that, little Vincent Jr. came along. My whole world wrapped up in a 7-pound bundle with my nose and Mariana's dimples. We didn't have much, but we had each other. A modest apartment, nothing fancy, but clean. Safe enough. I picked up weekend shifts whenever I could, stacking boxes and dreaming of something better. A small house, maybe with a little patch of grass and a tire swing out back, where Vincent Jr. could run wild and free. I wanted that for him. Worked every hour I could. Put every extra dollar in our savings account. Told myself it was only a matter of time before things turned. But no matter how hard I worked, it never seemed to be enough. The bills started coming faster than the paychecks. Little Vince needed new shoes. His toes were curling up at the front, and Mariana kept saying, "He can't go to school looking like that, Vincent." The car was making that awful grinding noise again. The mechanic said it was going to need a new timing belt, and I already knew what that meant, money I didn't have. Then the rent went up out of nowhere, like the landlord just decided we suddenly lived in a high-rise instead of a two-bedroom with leaky faucets and peeling paint. And Mariana, she wanted nicer things. I'd come home from a 10-hour shift, smelling like diesel and sweat, and there she'd be on the couch, scrolling through her phone, showing me pictures of her friends. Friends with new purses, new shoes, smiling next to cocktails in places I couldn't even pronounce. "Look at this," she said once, turning the screen toward me. "They're in Tulum. All-inclusive resort. Can you believe that? We deserve better than this, Vincent." I was at the kitchen table, counting out singles for the electric bill, crumpled bills, quarters from the jar by the door. "We shouldn't have to struggle like this," she added, not even looking up. And here's the truth, I agreed with her. Deep down I did. I played by the rules. Stayed in school, kept out of trouble, worked hard, got married, had a child. I did everything I was supposed to do. So why was life still so hard? Why couldn't I give my wife the life she dreamed of? Why couldn't I give my son the security he deserved? That question, that doubt, it was the first crack in the foundation I'd built. A small crack, barely visible. But pressure? Pressure will find any weakness. And that pressure came wrapped in pink paper. An eviction notice, bold letters shouting that we were 3 months behind on rent. I'd been working every extra shift I could grab, but it wasn't enough. The warehouse had cut back hours. They called it an economic downturn, like that meant anything to a man who still had mouths to feed. I remember walking into the apartment, that notice folded in my back pocket, like it might go away if I didn't look at it too long. I laid it gently on the coffee table, like it might shatter. Mariana came out from the bedroom, saw the paper, and her face didn't even change. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just sat down across from me and nodded, like she'd already seen it coming. "I told you this would happen," she said, her voice low. "I told you we needed more money." I dropped onto the couch, the springs creaking under me, buried my face in my hands. "I'm trying, Mariana," I said. "I'm working as much as they'll let me. I'm doing everything I can." She sat beside me, her hand resting gently on my knee. "Working harder isn't the answer, Vincent," she said. "We need to work smarter." That's when she first mentioned Lorenzo. "My friend Lorenzo," Mariana said one night, her voice low like somebody might be listening. Even though it was just the two of us in that apartment, the walls thin and the lights dimmed low. "He knows ways to make real money." I looked up from the pile of overdue bills on the table, already feeling the heat rising in my chest. "Lorenzo?" I asked. "You mean that Lorenzo? The guy with the new Escalade who never worked a day in his life? That Lorenzo?" She rolled her eyes, like I was a kid who didn't understand how the world worked. "Yes, Vincent. That Lorenzo. And before you start judging, ask yourself something." She leaned in a little. "Is your pride worth being homeless? Is it worth watching your son go hungry?" I shook my head, stood up from the table. "We're not going to be homeless," I said. "We're not going to go hungry. I'll figure something out. Something legitimate." Mariana didn't argue. She just stood up too, smoothing her shirt like she was brushing me off. "Well, while you're figuring it out," she said with a little bite in her voice, "I'm going to call my father. See if she can help us out until your legitimate solution comes through." That hit harder than I expected. I winced, sat back down. Her father, Jack, was a sharp man. Always perfectly dressed, always 2 steps ahead of every conversation. But there was something else. Something in the way he looked at me, like I was a project that had already failed. Like I wasn't enough for his daughter, and he knew it the moment we met. Still, we needed help. And pride. Pride wasn't going to keep the lights on. "Fine," I said, my voice quiet. "Call him. But tell him it's just a loan. We'll pay him back." Mariana nodded, but there was something in the way her lips curved into that small, almost smile. Something I didn't catch at the time. If I had, maybe I would have seen what was coming. But I didn't. And the crack in our life, what used to be just a thin fault line, was about to split wide open. Lorenzo Davis was everything I wasn't. Loud where I was quiet. Flashy where I stayed modest. Confident where I played it cautious. We met at a bar downtown, the kind of place I'd never go on my own. The bar was dimly lit. Dark corners, overpriced drinks, women in tight dresses moving through clouds of perfume and bass. Not my kind of place. Not by a long shot. But Lorenzo sat like he owned the room, already leaning back in a corner booth when I walked in, flashing that grin like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. "Yo, Vince," he said loud enough for heads to turn. "Come on, man. Sit." Before I could even look at the menu, he waved over the bartender and ordered 2 top-shelf whiskeys. Didn't even ask what I wanted. I sat, feeling out of place in my work jacket and worn-out boots, while he looked like he'd just stepped off a rap video set. Chains, watch, shoes I couldn't name. He didn't waste time. "So your lady says you need to make some real money," he said, sliding the drink toward me. No small talk. No warm-up. I shifted in my seat. I just need some extra cash, that's all. Temporarily. Just until I get back on my feet. Lorenzo let out a short laugh, cold like ice dropping in a glass. Temporarily? Sure. That's what everyone says at first. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Let me ask you something, Vincent. You work at that warehouse, right? How much you make an hour? I hesitated, then said it. 15. He nodded slowly, like he was doing math in his head. And you working what, 40 hours a week? 50 with overtime, maybe? When I can get it, I said, already feeling defensive. So best case, you bringing home what? $750 a week before taxes. Maybe $600 after Uncle Sam finishes his little robbery. I clenched my jaw, didn't answer. Lorenzo shook his head. And on that you trying to support a wife, a kid, an apartment? We manage, I said. Maybe a little too quick. A little too sharp. No, brother. You don't. That's why you sitting here with me. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, then set the glass down like he was about to change my life. Let me tell you what I can offer. I stayed quiet, listening even though I already knew I shouldn't. One day of work, maybe 8 hours, tops. $2,000. Cash. I blinked. Thought I misheard. What kind of work pays $2,000 for one day? He smiled, smooth as oil. The kind of work that values discretion, he said. The kind that recognizes not everybody gets the same shot in this world. So sometimes, you gotta make your own. He laid it out simple. Drive to Cincinnati once a month. Pick up a package. Bring it back to Detroit. That's it. No questions, no talking, just driving. $2,000 each trip, he said. I sat back, doing the math in my head. That was more than half my month's pay at the warehouse. $2,000, I said quietly. Exactly, he grinned. And the risk? Almost nothing for a man with a clean record like yours. Cops see a regular dude in a regular car, they don't look twice. I didn't say yes that night. Told him I needed time, needed to think. But as I drove home in my beat-up car, that check engine light glowing like a warning I'd learned to ignore, I couldn't stop thinking about that number. $2,000 in one day. When I got home, Mariana was sitting on the couch, still in her robe, the TV off, but the room buzzing with tension. She didn't even wait for me to take my coat off. So, she asked, eyes wide like a kid waiting for Christmas morning. What did you say? I sighed, lowering myself into the chair across from her. I told him I'd think about it. Her face felt like I'd slapped her. Think about it. What's there to think about, Vincent? We're about to be evicted. I ran a hand over my face. It's not that simple, Mariana. You know what he's asking me to do. She got up and came over, placed her hands on my chest. Her eyes locked onto mine, soft but sharp. I know what he's asking you to be, she said. He's asking you to be a provider. A man who takes care of his family. No matter what. The words landed like a punch. I am providing, I said, trying to hold my ground. I work overtime. I bring home every dollar I can. I'm taking care of you. Are you? She challenged, pulling back just a little. Because from where I'm standing, we're about to be out on the street. Is that taking care of us? I turned away from her, my chest burning with shame and frustration. On the wall above our television hung that framed Bible verse Mama gave us as a wedding gift. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. I stared at it, needing it to say more than it did, needing it to reach out and tell me what the hell I was supposed to do. I need to pray on this, I said quietly. Mariana laughed, sharp, bitter, like it had been waiting a long time to come out. Pray all you want, she said, folding her arms. But God helps those who help themselves, Vincent. Remember that part. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, the room pitch black except for the blinking red digits of the alarm clock beside me. My mind kept circling the same questions. What kind of man lets his kid go hungry because of principles? What good is being right if your lights are off and your wife's packing bags? By morning, I had my answer. Just once, I told myself. One trip, catch up on the rent, get ahead a little, then I'd find something better, something legit. Just once. That's what everybody says at first. The first run went down exactly like Lorenzo said it would. I drove to Cincinnati, took back roads, avoided tolls, stuck to the speed limit like I was an old man with nowhere to be. The pickup point was a crummy apartment building in a quiet neighborhood. I didn't even get out the car. A guy walked up, handed me a shoebox-sized package, and walked away. That was it. Back in Detroit by nightfall, $2,000 in cash counted out right there in Lorenzo's living room, fanned out like playing cards on the coffee table. I paid the rent, every cent of it. Got little Vincent new shoes, the kind with the lights in the soles he kept pointing at in the store window. I filled the car with gas without staring at the pump, without my stomach twisting at every click. That night, I slept. For the first time in months, I slept all the way through. When Mama asked how we managed to catch up on everything, I didn't blink. Over time, I said, and Mariana picked up some shifts at her cousin's salon. Mama gave me that look, the one that made me feel like I was 9 years old again, caught sneaking cookies before dinner. The one that stripped away every excuse I'd built up like armor. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't ask questions. She just looked me straight in the eye and said, "Whatever you're doing, son, make sure it's something you can face God with when your time comes." I nodded, but I couldn't meet her eyes. I was too afraid she'd see the truth staring back at her. The second run came about a month later. Same route, same shoebox, same thick envelope of cash. Then a third run. Each time I told myself it'd be the last. Just one more trip. Just until things got better. Just until I found another way. By the fourth run, we'd moved. A better apartment, new floors, more space, an actual laundry room instead of dragging baskets to the coin-op down the street. Mariana finally got that designer purse she'd been drooling over on Instagram. I picked up a used Lexus from a guy I trusted. Nothing crazy, but it started without needing a prayer. Little Vincent? He got into a charter school across town where the teachers knew his name and didn't just see another kid from a struggling zip code. Mariana stretched out on our brand new sectional sofa, scrolling her phone, a glass of wine in her hand. "See," she said, smiling without even looking up. "Isn't this better than struggling?" It was better. The money was better. The way people looked at me, more respect, more space. It was all better. But the knot in my stomach kept getting tighter. Every time I passed a police cruiser, I tensed. Every knock on the door made me jump. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, heart pounding, expecting sirens. After the sixth run, I sat Mariana down. "I want out," I told her. "We've saved enough. I've been crunching numbers. I can start a small business. Something real. Maybe a mobile detailing service. You know, go to people's houses, clean up their cars. I've already looked into licenses." Mariana's smile faded like a light dimming. Her whole face changed, hard, unreadable. "You can't quit now, Vincent," she said, her voice flat. "We're just getting started." "I don't want to end up in prison, Mariana," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'm serious." "You won't," she said quickly. "Lorenzo knows what he's doing. He's not some street dealer. He's connected. Besides," she came closer, placed her hand over mine. "You really think I'd let anything happen to my husband?" Her voice was soft, but her grip was firm. That same night, Jack came over for dinner. He was one of Lorenzo's guys. Older, always laughing too loud, too long. But that night, while Mariana was putting little Vincent to bed, Jack cornered me in the kitchen. "My daughter tells me you thinking of quitting your side business," Jack said, low and quiet. I stiffened. My hands were still damp from drying the dishes, but now they felt clammy. "You know about that?" Jack laughed, a short, dry sound with no joy behind it. "Boy, who you think put Mariana in touch with Lorenzo? We family now." His words hit me like cold water. I stared at him, trying to read between the lines. "It's too risky," I said finally. "I want out." Jack stepped closer. I caught a whiff of his cologne before I even registered how near he was, sweet and heavy, cloying. It reminded me of overripe fruit, like something about to turn. "Let me tell you something about this game," he said, his voice dropping lower, like we were back in that bar instead of my own kitchen. "I used to run product back in Memphis. Years. Made real money. But you know what? I got greedy. Took more than my share. Had to leave town with a quickness." He tilted her head toward little Vincent's room, and something in her face shifted, his eyes narrowing just a bit. "That's how we ended up in Cincinnati. Then here in Detroit." I swallowed hard. "You were in the game?" Jack smirked. "More than in it, baby. I was running it. I was the name they whispered when they didn't want to get caught. That's how I know you making good money with Lorenzo." He stepped closer again, lowered his voice. "Why walk away from that?" "Because I don't want to go to jail," I said, trying not to let the fear creep into my voice. "You won't. Not if you smart." He patted my cheek like I was a child, patronizing and intimate all at once. "Just a few more runs. Build up a real safety net. Then you can walk." Before I could respond, Mariana came back into the room, smiling like nothing had happened. Jack changed the subject in a heartbeat, started gossiping about church folks and talking weather. Like he hadn't just confessed to being a felon. Like he hadn't just handed me a loaded gun with no safety. That night, Mariana slid into bed wearing something red and lacy I'd never seen before. She curled into me, her lips brushing against my neck. "One more run," she whispered, fingers tracing the edge of my chest. For me, I didn't want to say yes. But I did. I always said yes to Mariana. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that this next run would be different. Lorenzo had debts. Big ones. And somehow, I'd become the payment. What I hadn't seen was the way Jack and Mariana shared looks when they thought I wasn't watching. What I hadn't known was that they'd made a deal long before I ever shook Lorenzo's hand. That one more run was always meant to be my last, but not in the way I planned. The next morning, little Vincent asked if we could look at old photo albums. He loved seeing baby pictures of himself, pointing and laughing at his toothless grin. While flipping through the album, something fell out from the back cover. I reached for it, thinking maybe it was a forgotten Polaroid. But it wasn't. It was a newspaper clipping, old and yellowing. The headline read, "Local drug ring busted, leader still at large." It was dated 10 years ago. Memphis. My eyes locked on the grainy photo beneath the headline. There she was, Jack, being led into a courthouse in handcuffs, his face younger but unmistakable. I just sat there, staring at it, my mind spinning. If Jack had been arrested in Memphis, how had he gotten away? Why had he never mentioned it? And the worst question, the one I couldn't push away, the one that twisted my gut into knots. If he'd been running drugs, how deeply was Mariana involved? I tucked the clipping into my wallet, pressing it flat behind my ID like I could somehow forget it was there. I didn't know what to do with it yet, but my gut told me it mattered. A lot. That night, I paid attention. The way Mariana and Jack whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. The small glances. The way their stories about the past never quite matched. One minute they claimed they hadn't spoken in years. The next they were laughing about a trip they'd taken together back in Cincinnati. Something was off, but I was already too deep. I'd made 6 runs. I'd bought the Lexus. I'd let the money soak into our lives like oil into pavement. There was no backing out now, not without questions, not without consequences. Then Lorenzo called. Change of plans, he said, not even bothering with small talk. Need you to go to Louisville this time. Louisville? I asked. That's not the usual. I know, he said, avoiding my eyes. It's a bigger package. Bigger money. $5,000 for this one. 5,000. I repeated, like I hadn't heard him right. With that, he added, you could start that little business you keep talking about. The mobile car wash thing. I didn't say yes right away, but I didn't say no either. Truth was, $5,000 could really change things. Get me off Lorenzo's leash. I could buy supplies, wrap the van, even put a deposit down on a garage space. Something legit. I didn't tell Mariana about the change in plans. Lately, she'd been off, secretive, cold one moment, sweet the next. She was taking phone calls in the other room, claiming they were her cousin or a co-worker from the salon, but the way she'd flinch when I walked in, and once, I caught her deleting texts before I could see the screen. So, I kept the trip to myself. The drive to Louisville was smooth. It was one of those early summer days that make you forget winter ever happened. Skies soft and blue, trees thick with green, wildflowers pushing up on the sides of the highway. I rolled down the windows and let the gospel play low on the speakers. For a few miles, I could almost pretend I was just a regular man. On a regular drive. The pickup was like clockwork. A guy in a tiger's cap met me outside a rundown apartment, handed off a package that felt heavier than it looked. I didn't ask questions. I never did. It wasn't until I hit I-71 North that the lights came up behind me. Red and blue, flashing like the 4th of July. My stomach dropped. I pulled over like I'd been trained to, hands at 10 and 2, breathing slow, heart punching through my ribs. License and registration, the officer said, his flashlight sweeping over the dash, the floor, the back seat. I gave it to him with steady hands. Is there a problem, officer? Step out of the vehicle, sir. That's when I knew. Somehow they knew. Knew what I was carrying. They didn't even ask any more questions. Just opened the trunk, popped the spare tire compartment. There it was, right where Lorenzo's guy had tucked it. For bricks. Kilos. Heroin. Street value just shy of $2 million, they told me later. The cuffs were cold around my wrists. I stared down at them like they belonged to someone else. My mind wasn't even in that car anymore. It was in my mama's kitchen, on her face when she'd said, make sure it's something you can face God with when your time comes. It was in my son's room. Little Vincent, sitting on the floor with his toy cars, waiting for me to come home. What would happen to him? What would happen to all of us? The preliminary hearing came quickly. I sat there, still in shock, barely able to make out what my lawyer was saying through the fog in my head. Something about bail being denied. Something about the weight of the charges, severe, federal, mandatory minimums. It all blurred together like water on glass. None of it felt real. 3 months in county jail didn't make it feel more real either. Just made it colder, louder, slower. Mariana came to visit at first, brought little Vincent once or twice. But over time, the visits stretched further apart, then stopped altogether. The only one who kept showing up was Mama. She'd sit on the other side of that thick glass, eyes wet with heartbreak, her hand resting on the phone like it was a crucifix. I told you, baby, she wept one time, barely able to speak. I warned you about fast money. She had. God help me, she had. But I didn't listen. By the time the trial came around, I felt like a ghost in my own skin. Anderson, my court-appointed lawyer, was a tired-looking white woman who barely even looked at me unless she had to. She shuffled papers like they annoyed her. sipped cold coffee like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Then the prosecution stood up and said, "The state calls Mariana Phillips to the stand." My head jerked up so fast I nearly pulled something. No, no, that couldn't be right. But there she was, Mariana, wearing a modest navy dress I'd never seen before. Hair pulled back tight, face clean of makeup, looking for all the world like a woman dragged into something awful, when in reality, she'd been swimming in it from the start. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mrs. Phillips," the prosecutor began, "can you tell the court about your husband's drug trafficking activities?" And Mariana did. She told them everything. The runs to Cincinnati, the money, the car, even conversations we'd had in whispers behind closed doors, the kind of talk you think only stays between a man and his wife. He said he liked the rush, she testified, voice trembling like she was barely holding it together. Said he didn't care about the risk. Objection. Anderson snapped, sitting up straighter than I'd seen her the entire case. Spousal privilege. I looked to the judge, hoping, just hoping. But he just shook his head. The witness has waived spousal privilege. Overruled. I couldn't breathe. Across the courtroom, I saw Mama. She looked like she was about to faint, hands clenched in her lap, lips moving in silent prayer. But that wasn't the worst of it. Not even close. "Mrs. Phillips," the prosecutor said, stepping closer, "was there anything else about your husband's behavior that concerned you?" Mariana dabbed at her eyes with a tissue like she was in a damn soap opera. He became violent," she said, voice cracking just enough to sound believable. "The more involved he got with drugs, the more his temper changed." The prosecutor nodded solemnly, then turned toward the evidence table. "Your Honor, State's Exhibit 27. He held up a photo, and I felt my stomach twist. It was Mariana. Bruised cheek. Split lip. "No, no, no, no. Can you tell us when this was taken?" the prosecutor asked. 3 months ago, Mariana whispered. "Vincent found out I'd been talking to an old friend from high school. Just catching up on Facebook. He accused me of cheating, and he hit me." The whole courtroom murmured, like a wave rolling over me. I was on my feet before I even realized it. "That's a lie," I shouted. "I never slapped her." Gasps all around. The judge slammed the gavel. "That picture is from something else," I yelled, straining against the officers coming up behind me. "Tell them the truth, Mariana. Tell them how you pushed me into this." "Mr. Phillips, control yourself or I'll have you removed," the judge warned. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't shut my mouth or my heart or the fire roaring in my chest. All I could see was Mariana, the woman I'd loved, the mother of my son, sitting on the stand, lying through her perfect teeth, and sobbing like she was the victim. Mariana sobbed on the stand. The next witness was Jack Williams. I had no idea what I was expecting, but it sure as hell wasn't this. "Mr. Williams," the prosecutor began, as the defendant's father-in-law, "did you witness any concerning behavior from him?" Jack nodded solemnly, like he was the authority on what was concerning. "I saw the bruises on my daughter," he said, voice steady. "I begged her to leave him, but she was scared." "Scared? Scared of me?" Jack continued, "and I overheard him many times, planning his drug runs, bragging about how much money he was making." I stared at him in disbelief. This man who had practically shoved me into dealing, was now painting me like some kind of kingpin? Like I had ever bragged about the hell I was living? Like I'd ever wanted any of this? By the time Elena took the stand for the defense, the damage was done. Her testimony, tearful, shaky, almost like she didn't believe it herself, felt hollow. "My son is a good boy," she said, voice breaking. "He went to church every Sunday. He worked hard. I don't know what happened, but this ain't him. This ain't my baby." I couldn't even look at her. She was crying, clutching that Bible like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. But nothing she said could fix what they'd done. When she stepped down from the witness stand, I saw it. The moment she locked eyes with Mariana, it was like something passed between them, something unspoken. Recognition, maybe. One mother who failed to protect her child, and the other who had already abandoned hers. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. I couldn't even hold on to hope. I could feel it slipping through my fingers, piece by piece. The verdict came down fast. "We find the defendant guilty." I closed my eyes, feeling the world around me collapse in on itself. 22 years. That's what the judge sentenced me to, with the possibility of parole after 15. As they started to pull me away, I glanced back. Mariana and Jack were already gone. Out the door. Out of my life. The only one left in the courtroom was Geraldine, her Bible clutched tight to her chest, tears streaming down her face. She was the last connection I had, but it didn't feel like anything worth holding onto anymore. Riverdale Correctional Facility became my new home. Concrete, steel, routine, violence. The first year passed in a blur of anger and betrayal. Mariana filed for divorce 2 months after the sentencing. She never visited, never wrote, not once. Through Elena, I heard about the new life they were building. Mariana and Jack had moved into a house in the suburbs. Somehow, they'd come into money. Blood money. That's what Elena spat during one visit, slamming her fist into the table. 30 pieces of silver for selling you out. And little Vincent? He was living with them, growing up without his father. The thought of my son being raised by the very people who'd betrayed me was almost more than I could bear. The fact that Jack and Mariana were playing house with my little Vincent, teaching him their twisted version of the world, that thought gnawed at my gut every day. It wasn't until I hit the 18th month mark inside that I met Archer. He was an older inmate, had been down for 15 years, and had that old-school Memphis air about him. Quiet but dangerous, the kind of guy you didn't cross. One day, out in the yard, I asked him about something I'd been chewing on for weeks. Memphis, I said, trying to sound casual. You ever know a man named Jack Williams? He would have been dealing back in the day. Archer's eyes widened at the mention of her name, like I'd just struck a nerve. Jack, man, he said, leaning in a little, his voice lowering. Everybody from the east side knew Jack. He worked for Big Carlos Reyes. Ran his whole operation on the south side. I nodded, but my heart was racing. Big Carlos Reyes? Archer gave a low whistle, like he couldn't believe what I was asking. Word is, he skimmed like 50, 60 grand off the top and disappeared overnight. Big Carlos been looking for him ever since. Ain't nobody forget that. That man made him look weak, stole from him. My stomach dropped. Carlos Reyes, he's still around? Oh yeah, Archer said. Running the whole Tennessee operation now. Did 10 years, got out stronger. He shot me a look. Why you asking about Jack? I could barely get the words out. He's my father-in-law. He and my wife set me up to take a fall. Archer's eyebrows shot up. He whistled low, like he was impressed, or maybe just shocked. Damn, young blood. That's cold, even for this game. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. All I could think about was Mariana's testimony, the lies Jack had told, the 22 years they'd cost me. It was hard to breathe, to think of anything else but the fact that they'd ruined my life. And little Vincent, my son, was growing up without me, being raised by these people who thought betrayal had a price. That night, lying on my bunk, I couldn't stop thinking about what Archer had said. Big Carlos was still out there, still looking for my father-in-law, after all these years. He had stolen from him, made him look weak. And in this world, things like that didn't just disappear. People didn't forget. It was all I could think about. It took me 2 weeks to make the decision. 2 weeks of remembering Mariana's lies, the way she'd twisted the truth, the way Jack had sold me out like I was nothing. 2 weeks of thinking about the life I should have had, the life I lost, because of their greed. But most of all, 2 weeks of thinking about my son, growing up without me, raised by women who'd teach him that betrayal was acceptable if the price was right. The prison phone was available during rec time, but I knew the calls were recorded and monitored. Still, I had learned how to talk in code over the years. Archer had given me a number, his cousin's in Memphis. She could get a message to Big Carlos for me. Are you sure about this? Archer asked as I stood there, dialing the number. I didn't answer right away, just stared at the numbers on the phone, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Once it's done, it's done. I thought about my mother crying in court. I thought about the life I should have had. And I thought about betrayal. The call lasted less than 3 minutes, just enough time to pass along the details I knew. Jack Williams was living large in Detroit with his daughter. Their new address, their routines. I gave just enough information to make sure Big Carlos would get the message. No strings. A gift. 3 weeks later, Elena came to visit. Her face was grim, her eyes sad in a way that made my stomach tighten before she even spoke. I thought you should hear this from me, she said, her voice low. Mariana and Jack Williams are missing. The police are looking into it. My heart sank, but I didn't let anything show on my face. She paused for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. Their house was broken into in the middle of the night. No sign of them. Just gone. The words hit me like a punch in the gut, but I kept my expression neutral. The police are doing what they can, she added. I swallowed hard, my mind racing with 1,000 possibilities, none of them good. Little Vincent is with me now, Elena said quietly. He was at a sleepover that night. Thank God. Relief flooded me like a wave. At least my son was safe. At least he was with her, where he belonged. People are saying they probably ran off, Elena continued, her voice low. Running off in the night seems to be their pattern. I met her eyes, but didn't say anything. She didn't ask if I knew anything, and I didn't volunteer. I didn't need to. I'm sure they are chilling with the angels, was all I said. Elena reached across the table and squeezed my hand. For the first time since my arrest, she didn't look disappointed in me. There was something else there, something warmer, something softer. Maybe forgiveness. That night, back in my cell, I slept better than I had in years. The weight of everything, Mariana's betrayal, the lies, the years in prison, seemed to lift, just a little. 22 years was a long time, but my son was safe. And sometimes, justice came in unexpected ways. 5 years into my sentence, I had changed. The angry, impulsive young man who'd walked into this place was gone. In his place was someone quieter, more thoughtful. I got my GED, started taking college courses, began counseling younger inmates who came through. I had to do something to make sense of it all, to make sure I wasn't just wasting away in this place. Elena visited every month, regular as clockwork. She brought me books, told me the latest church gossip, kept me connected to the world outside. But the best news she brought was always about little Vincent. "He asks about you," Elena would say, her voice warm and proud. "I tell him his daddy made some mistakes, but he loves him very much. That he's working hard to come home one day. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe it. That maybe, just maybe, I would come home one day. It wasn't the life I'd imagined for myself or for my son, but it was a life with hope, a life with a future. I never thought I'd end up here, behind these steel bars, but at least I had something to hold on to now, something to believe in." One day, during one of Elena's visits, she looked at me with that familiar look, the one that told me she was thinking deeply about something, wrestling with the past. "I've been thinking about what happened," she said, her voice quieter than usual. I tensed. I could feel it coming. The conversation I wasn't ready for, the one I feared. "I was so focused on keeping you in church, keeping you away from the streets that I didn't teach you enough about people. About how the devil don't always look like the devil. Sometimes he looks like love." I froze. The words hit me like a slap to the face. This wasn't what I wanted to hear. Not now. Not after everything I'd been through. "Mama, let me finish," she said, her hand resting on the table between us. "Son, what you did was wrong. Dealing drugs, that's wrong. But what they did to you, setting you up, that's a different kind of evil." I looked down at my hands, clenching them into fists, trying to keep my composure. But I could feel the anger rising, the weight of all those years spent in here, all those years wasted. I had trusted her. I had trusted them. And look where it got me. "You think God forgives that kind of evil?" I asked, my voice hoarse, the question hanging heavy in the air. Elena was quiet for a long moment, and I could hear the soft shuffle of feet in the hall outside the room. The world felt so far away from where I was sitting, locked up in this small room with nothing but the sound of my own breath and my mother's silence. "I think God forgives everything, if there's true repentance," she said finally, her voice steady. "But I don't think some people live long enough to repent." Her words cut through me, sharper than any knife. I knew what she meant. The people who'd wronged me, Mariana, Jack, even Lorenzo, did they have time to change? To ask for forgiveness? Or had they already made their choices, sealed their fates? Our eyes met across the table, and in that moment, I knew that my mother knew. Maybe she'd always known. About Mariana. About the lies. About everything. And that realization hit me harder than anything I'd felt in years. 17 more years is a long time, Mama, I said, my voice quieter now, the weight of time pressing down on me. She nodded, her expression soft but resolute. "It is. But you ain't alone. And when you get out, I'll be waiting. We'll start again." I didn't know if I believed her. I didn't know if I believed I could make it through 17 more years in this place. But her words, they gave me something to hold on to. A thread of hope. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't all lost. As the guards led me back to my cell, I thought about choices. The choice to start dealing. The choice to trust Mariana. The choice to make that phone call from prison. To give Carlos the information that would change everything. I didn't regret that last choice. Not really. But sometimes I wondered about parallel lives. The life where I'd said no to Mariana from the beginning. The life where I'd listened to my mother's warnings and walked a different path. Back in my cell that night, I pulled out the small Bible my mother had brought me. Inside the cover, in her careful handwriting, she'd written a single line. "The truth shall set you free." I wasn't free. Not in the physical sense. But something was changing inside me. The weight was lifting. The anger that had consumed me for so long. Maybe it wasn't gone, but it was fading. And in its place, there was something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. A flicker of peace. A glimmer of hope. The future, distant as it was, held possibilities. 22 years was a long time, but not forever. And sometimes, even in the darkest places, there was light to be found. So that's my story. Vincent Phillips, a man who made bad choices, paid a heavy price, and ended up in a place I never imagined. When Mariana and her mother testified against me, I thought that would be the end of it. They thought they'd written the last chapter. But even behind these bars, a man can rewrite the ending. I made mistakes. I won't deny that. I did things that can't be undone. But what they did to me, that wasn't right either. They sold me out. My wife. My father-in-law. The people who should have been standing by me when it mattered the most were the first ones to sell me out. They painted me as the villain, and the whole damn courtroom believed it. But in this game of life, it ain't always about right or wrong. Sometimes it's about survival. Sometimes it's about justice that doesn't come from a courthouse. I learned that the hard way. You can't always trust the ones you think you can. Not when the stakes are high. Not when the game is life or death. I think about that sometimes when I lay awake at night. About what I could have done differently, about what I should have seen, but it doesn't matter now. I'm here, and they're gone. I still remember the last visit I had with Elena before the whole thing went down. I had no idea that things would change so much from that day forward. We were talking about everything that was going on, about my son, about the time I had left, about what the future could look like if I played my cards right. You know, Vincent, Elena said, looking at me across the table, her voice soft but firm, family ain't always blood. She was right. The ones who are supposed to love you the most can end up being the ones who betray you the fastest. People are always trying to manipulate the game, trying to come out on top. It's all about survival, isn't it? At least it feels that way sometimes. But here's the thing I've learned, especially in this place. Survival ain't just about fighting. It's about knowing who you can trust, who you can lean on. And you have to keep that circle tight, real tight. You can't afford to let too many in, especially when you've seen what people are capable of. Keep your circle tight. I say to myself sometimes in the dark of the night. And your trust tighter. In the end, that's all you have left. Trust. And when it gets broken, when it shatters, you learn the hard way that not everyone who says they've got your back really does. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.